What's up, Dragon Ball Super family? I'm Legends Michael Kerrick, and I'm bringing you my Crimson Warrior deck profile that I used to take first place at TCG Con Houston this weekend. It was a fun event, not too large, I think 40 to 50 people. We played 6 rounds day 1, then we played another 3 rounds for Top Cut day 2, so overall it was a 9-round event. Played pre-side day 1, so you see a couple sideboard choices in the main deck, and then we played a standard best of 3 day 2 for Top Cut. I had a blast. There was a lot of decks you expect, like Gamma, a couple Beerus, some SS4 Gogeta representing, like Goku and Vegeta representing red, and I think there was like 2 or 3 Crimson, a couple green players. There was like Cold, and there was a King Cold, and there was a Cooler, and then there was like a bunch of like yellow trucks. So that gives you a representation of what was in the room. I myself played a lot of blue, so that was not a great time. I must have played like 3 or 4 Gamma matches, a Beerus match, a Crimson match, and then I played a smattering of other colors. And of course there was a couple black decks there. There was a Black Mass Saiyan, and then there was also Kai at Time. So anyway, I decided to go Crimson because I think it's got just like the best matchup spread, doesn't lose as badly as Beerus to hand control. And it was really just between this or Gamma from a preferred blue deck of the choice. Um, but let's go right in. So this leader recently got errated. It no longer allows you to just awaken with just 5 Saiyans in the drop. Now you have to be at 4 life and have to be able to tuck 5 Saiyans underneath this leader to awaken. That errata actually just didn't affect this leader at all, in my opinion, because I think if you were playing this leader effectively, you were going to 4 life anyway. So the leader also has a self-awaken tool in its activate battle, which is not once per turn. So if your opponent attacks you, it's really easy to get down to that 4 life, and if they don't attack you, we played a couple self-awakeners to help ourselves get there. Once on the backside, you can, when this card attacks, you draw a card and then switch up to one of your mono blue energy to active mode, and then activate battle. Of course, you can send one of the cards underneath this leader to the drop to gain 2k for that battle. If you send 3 more cards, you of course untap another energy, or you untap an energy and draw a card as well. So super powerful leader. It like people often compare it to Soul Striker, but the value of being able to control when you get that untap is really strong. That second untap, and then also the like effectively 3 uses of free defensive comboing with the activate battle actually comes in handy. That's effectively 3 attacks you nullified just based off your leader ability. So that's really strong. Alright, going to the deck, as usual, we'll go through mulligan order, and we'll go over why we made some decisions. So to start off with, like, we were mulliganing for 1-drops, right? So this is our self-awakener of choice. There's the Super Saiyan Son Goten, the Interceptor. It's just on attack, it takes a life, and then at the end of the turn it stands back up, switches back to active mode, right? This prevents your opponent from, like, checking it through combat. But most importantly, like in the Beerus matchup, which is probably one of the worst matchups for this deck, to clear this, Beerus would want to attack the leader, right? But if you leave your leader as the only attackable target, like, that serves the same purpose by leaving it on the field. Because now Beerus has to attack your leader, and yes, they might get to kill this if they choose that route, but you'll get to take 2 life because you'll take life from the attack, and then you'll activate battle and take a 2nd life. So it really is a 3 life taker versus Beerus. It's just really cool concept. And then of course, the fact that it restands means you don't have to like commit a 2nd energy to another self-awakener on turn 2. Some of the choices worth considering are Pan Awakening Talent, because you can, it's obviously a self-awakener, but you can put it back to hand and then you can discard it for the activate battle. I didn't think that was necessary because you have more than enough Saiyans to discard for the leader effect. And then of course there's the like double strike Vegeta for a little bit more of aggressive play, but like it's harder to get down to 4 life and really turn that engine if your opponent's not attacking you, so the Vegeta doesn't really do you many favors there. I still play 2 copies of Borgos, Bardock's crewmate. Even if this wasn't pre-side, I'd probably still play this. It's a ditchable Saiyan in the matchups that it's bad. It's a 1 mana cantrip in the matchups that's bad, and then in the matchups it's good, like in the Crimson, Gamma, or Beerus. It shines, right? Like it turns off D magic effectively outside of being just a 1 mana or a sparking negate. But now, of course, that negate no longer untaps energy, so that's huge in those matchups. Your opponent kind of has to commit a Beerus to clear it if they really want to deal with it, or like a Baby Avenger late game. And both of those have counterplays that you can use to play around them. So that's really effective. And then the last card I would look for in the opening. So at least one of these, right, to play, ideally. And then if you can't find one of these 2, you'd find one of your copies of your Pan Glimpse of Talent. I played 4 copies of Pan. She's just a 1-mana cantrip, right? Of course, she synergizes with the Piccolo later in the deck, but I play 4 copies because I really value the ability for Piccolo to be able to draw 2 cards from the deck effectively. So I really always wanted to have one of these in the deck. And then, of course, worst case, late game, like you can pay 1 for her to draw and then swing with leader, untap, and draw, or you can just charge her, and she's always an easy 0 for 5k energy. She also has some cool combos with your SCR where you can give it to your opponent before you use your SCR to put her back into your hand to give yourself yet another card to, like, once again cantrip again with. So that's pretty cool. And then I played all 4 copies of Piccolo the Infiltrator. Like, this deck functions so well as a blue aggro deck. If you get to win the die roll, like, you always want to see Piccolo the Infiltrator on 2, right? It's so hard to prevent this card from getting value. It comes down for 2 energy, and then it draws 2 cards from your deck. And what I mean is it filters a card out of your deck by searching the pan straight out of your deck, which is a very Yu-Gi-Oh-like effect. And then that pan itself draws and then becomes a 0 for 5k, right? So that's so much value. You just gained a card in your hand to replace it, and you gained a card to combo with. That, like, effectively is very unpopular to remove. So that's really cool. And then, of course, it pressures for dual attack 20k, which is a really hard number to deal with early game because nobody's really playing super combos nor wants a super combo out of that. That helps you check unisons early if you really need to. There's just so much value you can get out of this Piccolo. And then if your leader's like, if you're struggling to get down to 4 life to awaken, even if you do play this card, you can just swing once with it, like play the pan and then swing once with it, right? And then leave it in active mode. Now if your opponent wants to attack and get some kind of value, they're going to have to attack your leader, not the rest position Piccolo. Just some things to think about. So if you have a 1-drop and a Piccolo, then we're going to look at some alternative things to keep in your hand afterwards. So if you have the 2 aforementioned cards, then you're going to want to look for any amount of copies of Videl to keep in your hand. It's like the perfect card to cycle with your leader activate battle. Videl generically is a counterattack. Burst 1 negate the attack and play this card. So that's just whatever. She's like the best one we could play from this archetype because she's a 1 energy negate. There's probably a Vegeta out there that like prevents comboing her or like interrupts comboing. That one's cute. I just didn't find it very necessary. The fact that she's a Saiyan in all areas means she interacts with our leader, interacts with our deck. She's that's pretty cool. She's 0 for 5 as usual, and then of course, when she's used as part of the activate battle from underneath your leader, if you have nothing else in your combo area when you do this, she goes in your combo area. So this allows your leader effect to combo out of, like, become effectively super combos. So, like, I think that's what really gives this leader value over Soul Striker, is you get 2 free super combos in terms of defense off of your leader. And no matter how much energy you're tapping in Soul Striker, you can't generate 6 super combos, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's really, like, the difference maker here. And then, of course, a couple other cards to cycle through, and really a pre-side tech choice. I played 2 copies of Grade 8 Son Goku Saiyan Instincts. This is, of course, versus hand control. But, of course, you can cycle it from your leader front side effect, so that's really effective. You can also choose to, like, late game or mid to late game, if you have nothing to do and you really want to get your leader effect off because you know you're going to attack into a floodgate, you can, like, activate the Saiyan Instincts first to draw 2 from the drop, then swing at the leader so if they do floodgate you, you got maximum value off of your turn, right? That way you can generate all the card advantage you need. And this came up quite often versus my Gamma matches because their focus was mainly to just floodgate me out of my early game since I built a more aggressive version than Andrew's deck. So, like, if they... I guess in their mind, if they figure they can floodgate me out of the early game, then maybe they can win the late game. But that's just not true. Like, being a blue deck, all of our threats scale really well into the late game. Like, our Z deck scales really well into the late game, so that really has that covered. A couple more Saiyans we can cycle / can use for cycling defense. And this probably should have been on the defensive part of the video, but we're moving away from our early game mulligans, and now we're talking about the rest of the deck, right? Realistically, after you find those first 2 cards, you can keep any Saiyans in your mulligan, but you'd want to obviously look for some copies of Fidels to make your front side activate battle as efficient as possible, right? This is just if you combo this card, you can draw a card. Or you have to draw a card. All draws are mandatory in this game. I don't know why I said can. If you combo this card, you have to draw, or you draw a card, and then you can Z it. So it's really cool. It's a Saiyan, once again, so you can cycle with your leader front side. It just helps you not avoid those bricky hands in the early game. Probably 2 to 3 copies is fine. I liked 3. It came up a lot, obviously, just to cycle through attacks. And then 2 copies of SS Rose Goku Black Mortals Be Gone. This is just a great card versus the Gamma matchup. Any, like, loaded ground threat decks. Of course, you can cycle it if you really need to, and something I really like about, like, all the blue cards in this deck is that you can charge all of them and then pick them up with Zeno, right? For, like, when you need them. This is a great card to charge and then, like, pick up with Zeno when you need it in a pinch. Because, like, you really don't use it early game, right? Because one, you're not gonna have 3Z energy, and two, you're not really like you're trying to take hits anyway, right? But late game, if this is in your energy, your opponent might either not A, think about it, or like B, they think it might be down for the count, or they just like try to play around. Either way, you've added a level of complexity to your opponent's decision making that they didn't like have to deal with before. So like you get all that value just by charging a card in your energy as a blue player, and I think that's super impactful. Anyway, so what the card does, I'm sorry, I got ahead of it. So, as an activate battle limit 1, if your leader's mono blue and you have 3 or more Z energy, you can play this card from your hand. And you can play this card from your hand. And auto, when it's played, you target one of your opponent's, or choose up to one of your opponent's 4 drops or less and bottom deck it. Not ignoring barrier, right? But it's also just like a double strike threat. So like, as an interruptive card, this is really great. The double strike threat like rarely ever matters. I don't think I ever killed anybody with this card because you really just can't win in Dragon Ball with battle cards that don't have like some broken protection or like offensive skill. So like, it's really just like a poke tool. Like you make it a 25k poke tool, or you can leave it, or you can use it to like check some unisons. But really, it's just there for an interruptive effect to really swing the tides of a turn. And then talking about more interrupted blue cards that you can charge, we got 2 copies of Sun Gohan Power Reclaimed. This is a card I like strongly kept bouncing back and forth between 2 copies or 3 copies. If I played a 3rd copy, I'd probably replace this the 3rd copy of Unbreakable in the deck. The card's really good, obviously, early game, mid game, late game. As a 3-mana threat to clear any battle card, that's really cool. It's a really great answer to Cumber because Cumber can't take it on play. It's a really great answer to SS4, Goku, and Vegeta early game. Because you can use the 1-mana auto to clear a threat. Speaking of those autos, just if you have 4 or less life, you can tap 3 and you can play this card from your hand. When it's played, you can choose any battle card, not ignoring barrier, and you bottom deck it. And then if this card's like added to your Z energy, you can pay 1 blue, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with cost like 5 or less, something like that, and bottom deck it. I think that part's like super important that people don't think about. It's really powerful versus dual attackers that don't have any like barrier protection or anti-remover protection. So that's like the Gamma dual attackers. Even this like Piccolo Infiltrator, if you can use this card to like combo out of an early attack and then like get rid of the Piccolo before it gets value, or any dual attacker gets value, that's super good already. That's like the only reason I'd really want to play a 3rd. And of course, like late game, it makes you feel super safe versus big threats. Even like the Gohan SCR coming down is not really a threat as long as you have access to like 2 or 3 copies of this left. Same with like the Cell from Gamma or any like big threat that isn't Gogeta Triumphant Might from SS4 Goku and Vegeta. Same thing about the Zeno and like charging it, like everything I talked about the Goku Black, like it just adds another level of complexity to your opponent's like decision making if you just charge a copy in your energy early, instead of like cycling with your leader. And then the only overarm I decided to play was Dark Brawly, Heartless Berserker, mainly because it's a Saiyan, so you can cycle with your leader. Yeah, it sucks that it can't be comboed with. That came up once. I died because I needed a 5k off my super combo, and I drew this. And it was off of like a cycle 1 card, and I drew this, so that sucked. But like there aren't many other better Saiyans for this format. Like this clears a negate blocker, which comes up a lot. This clears like cheeky blockers that your opponent tries to use for like last second ditch defense. That's really helpful when you're going in for game. On your kill turns, if you have like your Gohan SCR, this is a really cool like addition to that Gohan SCR. If you find it in your early game hands, don't be afraid to cycle it. That's kind of why I played the 2nd one and why I even considered a 3rd one, because like I wanted to cycle them and get them out of my hand early, but I also wanted to see them as like just like mid game removal. There's not much more to be said about this card. It's really strong. And probably the last cyclable Saiyan I play in this deck that I would consider cycling is Baby Golden Avenger. Obviously for the matchups where it's not great, like red, you can just cycle it early game. For the matchups where it's blue, you you kind of want to just hold it in your hand. I probably wouldn't even charge this. I'm sure there are some mind games you can play with this by charging it, but like if you have to telegraph it super hard when you pick it up with Zeno, then your opponent really gets to defend against it. Obviously, it's just there to snipe out Baby Hat, just to hit those like perfectly timed dormant potentials to win you the game, or like those Android 14 whatever inorganic horror. I forgot what Gamma's floodgate's called or something like that. But it's really just for that. It also versus like Beerus and SS4 Vegeta, gives you an opportunity to counterplay the Vegeta GT 6 drop that ramps in 4 mana, right? Like swinging into Beerus when they're about to go into their 6 mana turn and just leaving 5 up, like spending 1 mana to cantrip and like swinging, creating pressure, using your board to pressure, and then just leaving 5 energy up, actually kind of ruins their turn. If you really think about it, because now they can't just slam 6 and ramp 6. Like it actually changes the flow of the game really hard in that matchup. So something like as a blue player and you're struggling to counterplay that Vegeta GT, start thinking about how you can use Baby Golden Avenger to help you in that scenario. Obviously, that plays a lot harder to do if you're on the draw. Um, and we'll talk about our super combo split. 2 copies of Vegeta Discipline War, 2 copies of Zeno Edge of Space. I'm always a defensive player, so I like to be able to have defensive choices and backup plans. Plus, I like the versatility that Zeno grants me. There's probably a great argument to be made for playing 3 or 4 Vegetas and just like 1 or 0 Zenos. It's whatever your preference really is. The Vegeta can be cycled early if you desperately need to, although I just wouldn't suggest it. 1 copy of Dirty Burst. Rather have it and not need it than not or need it and not have it, right? I play 1 copy. It's just really a respect card to like Gamma and SS4 Goku and Vegeta for that 8-drop. It just saves you a lot of value. And also just like in the mirror match, like it comes up versus Bisan, you can just leave 2 up or 2 or 3 up going into every turn that Bisan is live, and this suddenly can reduce the impact of that turn that they play it. Another just like cycle card. This probably could be replaced by more copies of Unbreakable. It's nice that this card is chargeable though. Realm of the Gods Beer is destroyed. I'm sorry I haven't been going over the last few cards. I just figured they've been in the format for so long. But just like red isn't in the format anymore, in my opinion, or it's just not as popular. So like, we still have it in case we do run into the red player and like they go into rush attack. Since we're not playing Boo, they're less likely to like activate barrier for the rush attack, or we're just such a defensive deck that like they haven't been able to generate enough Z energy. But regardless, it has that application, right? But most of the time, it's just like a way to like super combo without having to use a super combo, and then or just like an early game charge because it's obviously not a cyclable Saiyan. And then like it's another charge that like functions well with your Zeno super combo because you can pick it up later with Zeno to get out of really high attacks. Speaking of another card that you can charge early and get out of high attacks with Zeno, play a couple copies of Ultra Instinct Goku's Kamehameha. Just a 15k, helps you go for game on your kill turns because it's a 15k draw 1. On your defense, it's an absurd card. It perfectly clears out of super combos with 1 card, so that's really nice. 3 copies of Senzu Bean. It's a great answer to Gamma. I think Gamma is one of the better matchups into this deck. Senzu Bean kind of shuts down Gamma's turns since they're all like 15 flats. Honestly, if you're a go wide deck and you stay at 15 and 20k for all your attackers, you're a pretty good matchup into this deck. Since its majority of defense is like super combo based, kind of like Janemba used to be, like blue Janemba. But Senzu Bean lets us do some pretty cool tricks between our Gohan, our Goku Black, and our like Beerus Destroyers and Cycle cards. Another card you can charge early. D-Magic, probably the most charged card of this weekend. I probably shouldn't be playing 3 copies. I'll probably play like 1 to 2 in the future. But it's obviously just a great blue card. Negate 1, untap 2. There's not much to be said about it. Oftentimes I charged it. I guess it's another card I'm glad I had and didn't need rather than like need and didn't have scenario. We'll move on to some of the tech choices. Smoky Dragon's an obvious one already. Everybody's kind of playing this card, especially in like every blue deck. It's like the honorary blue card, right? Like you pay 2, and then you can like pick from 1 of 3 really amazing options, and then it's a 5k combo. Like that's already a swell like effect. So and this leader of course makes it cost 1 by like just swinging with your lead afterwards. It's just like a proactive ape that you can play. You don't have to get in the drop early. So. Not much to be said. You could probably play 3 copies if you really wanted to. I made the deck 50 cards because I hate making it more than 50. And I wanted to be able to see my SCR as often as possible, which is relevant because I saw my SCR at probably most of my games. So cutting down Smokey to 2 is a good way to get down to 50. A couple copies of Desperate Measures. I truly think blue is probably the best color this format. Probably like between Beerus, Crimson, and Gamma. And I'm sure there's some green deck out there that I'm just not thinking about. But like Desperate Measure is really great versus Beerus and Gamma, right? Because it stops all of Gamma's floodgates, and then versus Beerus, it stops the Whis from the Z deck from ramping. And I think that's really impactful. Also, just like in blue matches, sometimes just developing threats that your opponent wants to use the Beerus Area Annihilator for, and then like you leave a mana or 2 or an energy or 2 open to be able to hold back a Desperate Measures to counter that line. Just slingshots you ahead in the game if they play into it. So that was really powerful to have around. I'm sure that an argument can be made for that new one that came out in set 19. It's like Decisive Strike or something like that. I'm sure there's a value to be made for that one. This is just live early versus Beerus, which is where it matters because, like I said, Beerus is a very, very difficult matchup for this deck if it gets going. So just having, like, being able to attack with leader and then just pass with 1 energy up means Beerus just can't do the ramp thing if they didn't open their 1-drop. And then late game it can also interrupt their Annihilator play, like I said, or their 1-drop. I think this is just the obvious SCR of choice for this deck. It does way too much for this deck. On its own, it functions as 3 points of damage, and then if you include the restand of leader, it functions like 4 to 5 points of damage if you add a Champa to your leader, and that's all just off of this, like the 2 energy used to play this card, right? Like you can just start with the 2 energy on this card, and like you have access to 5 points of damage. Like you're threatening that much, and 3 of which is with 3 of which is crit, which is just kind of mind-boggling to me. Um, uh, I don't know. I think something needs to be done about this. I used to talk about how Hatch needed to be like super power crept to finally have another blue SCR come into the game, and this is one of them. But like ironically, I think it only really fits for decks like this or Soul Striker, whereas like in Gamma and Beerus, I think Hatch is probably still the way to go. And then of course the 50th card, this Furthering Destruction Champa. I mean, these 2 cards plus your leader just representing 5 damage it's kind of insane to me. Off 2 energy. Obviously, you need a minimum of 3 energy to do this, and then like coupled with like a Piccolo, like say you're going to your turn 3 and you have like these 3 cards in your hand, you can like easily close out a game from 6 or 7 life just doing this. Depending on what you're playing against, right? So like, or like put your opponent in such a bleeding position that they just can't come back, and then like that's another scenario versus blue where like the desperate measures are super big, because like say you developed the Gohan and you couldn't kill them, like obviously blue's first thought is to go into Beery Annihilator or find some way to clear the Gohan and attack. So like you can just desperate measures, and now your opponent's like really in trouble to get out of the game, because then you just get more value out of your Gohan. That's the 50 card main deck. I dropped 1 match day 1 versus Gamma. It was really rough. I do think, like I said, I think Gamma's just really tough for this deck. And then day 2, I went second all day day 2 because I seeded 6th into Top Cut. And I went second to Gamma. I 2-0'd him. I went second to another Gamma. I 2-1'd him, and then I went second into a Beerus, and I 2-1'd him. A lot of that just has to do with the side deck, and I always preach like practice more side deck games than you do main deck, because that's gonna matter, right? So speaking of, let's quickly dive into the side deck. 1 copy of Absolute Confidence for Gamma and Cooler. So when Gamma does the -4, you can get a lot of value by just confidencing the Unison and getting out of that turn. It doesn't sound like value because they already got value off their 2-drop, but like it saves you defensive cards in your hand, where you can just use 1 card instead of two like cycle cards and plus a 5k or a bean to get out of those attacks. For obvious reasons versus Green Cooler. Some hand control hate. Blue decks in general are just weak to hand control, so these are like, you could probably modify this however you want. I wanted to max out on Saiyan Instincts because obviously it synergizes with the leader early game. You can discard it, and then of course Dabra for a standard hand control hate. 1 copy of Kami for yellow. Nothing new there. An extra copy of Dirty Burst for the matchups it applies to. That's like Gamma, SS4 Gogeta Goku, or Vegeta Goku. 1 copy to Jiren, Survival of the Fittest for any deck that you see that's playing Android Turning the Tide. That like obviously includes beer, some Gamma lists, some other like Ramku, SS4 Vegeta blue lists. Couple copies of Koitsukai Mechanical Courage is great versus like Gamma, Floodgate heavy decks, so a lot of yellow decks. I can't really think of any others right now. A Cooler, like red blue Cooler. A 2nd copy of Furthering Destruction Champa. So this was a choice I made to try to close out the game versus Beerus. Like I said, Beerus, very hard matchup for this deck, so I decided like 6 cards for it. This gives us a second tool to like just be able to find a second way to end the game as fast as we can. The longer it gets, the worse it gets for us, right? Like I said, our tools scale well, but they don't scale as well as top 16 win the game. So this was just a second way to find like early game pressure, chunk down our opponent, and like also like a lot of Beerus players make the mistake of not having a second Boo loaded in the hand. So like a lot of times they'll block the leader swing early game, so you can just Champa and then swing 2 barrier Piccolo swings into it, and suddenly their Boo is gone, right? And now you still have his Champa left for the end game. A 2nd Baby Golden Avenger for Beerus and like blue in general, or heavy control decks. And then 3 copies of Hirudegarn Accursed Destroyer for heavy control decks. So this card's created by our last year's world champion and possibly this year's world champion, Andrew Duvall. It rivals for 2 blue and one colorless, so that's pretty cool. As long as you have 2 blue battle cards, it probably has some other blue or green in the text, but obviously 2 or more blue battle cards in our battle area and our combo area, so that's pretty cool. And then on activate main, you can KO one of your own cards to ramp an energy off the top of your deck. Like that's really powerful. versus blue, because obviously they're trying to stall the later game. But if you can get to a bunch of your energy early, you can put out a lot more threats and close out the game very quickly. Also, it's really convenient that you can like ramp a card in rest mode with this card, and then swing with your leader to untap it, right? Like if this survives the turn, which it might versus blue, since you play the a way to counter area annihilator, so that's pretty cool. And then on swing, just as like a cherry on top, it top decks an opponent's a card from your opponent's hand onto their top of their deck, which is like the best form of hand control, because they're like draw for turn is just totally reset. That doesn't give them any new information to play with. Um, the fact that like this card, it kind of won me my top cut matches like really hard, both versus Beerus and one of the Gamma matches. It's just like the amount of advantage it generates into a blue matchup is just so strong. And then quickly going over the Z deck, I used everything this weekend in the Z deck, so I don't know if I would change it. One copy of SSB surmounting the impossible. Sometimes your opponents leave you at 6 life and then negate, and like you don't want to swing their leader because you already have like 3 or 4 Saiyans in the drop, so you like swing at the Self Awakener, then you play this you swing at the Self Awakener, combo with the 5th Saiyan from your hand, play this dude, and then that gets the 5th Saiyan into the drop, that puts you at 4 life, and then now you can awaken with your leader and continue your day. 2 copies of Cell Awakening the Created. It's obviously it does what it does. It's mainly used for the critical attack concept. Like crit's nice whenever you can get it, and then a 25 crit body that you always have access to is just hard to trade, like hard to give up, you know. And I don't know why, but I have a black mark on this cell, so I'll have to fix that later. 1 copy of Vegito. This card came up just infinite time. Just by the time it gets turn vial, like I said. Like I said, our threats are starting to fall off, or don't scale as well into the late game. So this is one of our scaling late game threats. It's really good in those attrition games where you just have to you're trying to out card economy your opponent. This clears 2 cards, or at minimum 1 every turn, and then it's a blocker, so it even absorbs an attack every turn. And then since it's a triple K threat with Bearer, it even absorbs like defensive tools every time it attacks. So every turn this card survives on the field, it just generates more and more advantage of that attrition battle. It's a good way to finish the game from 3-0 if you have no other ways to do it. 2 copies of Beery Area Annihilator. There was a time where I even considered playing a 3rd copy over the 2nd cell, because you just go into this card so often. It's just a great threat into blue. It's got Barrier, it's a triple attack. Like, blue just suffers into this card so hard. Boo does nothing, right? Like, you can even spend the second 2 hits on the Boo if you want, and then of course it lets you clear like whatever threats your opponent has. And if you really have nothing to do for a turn, and you like can't even attack, like so let's say you swung at your leader and you got floodgated, but you have like 4 energy up, I would just develop this and just leave the 2 up going to my opponent's turn for defense. Because now they either have to answer this, or like any threat they put down is immediately just up for discussion due to the activate main of this card. And then my 7th card was the Ultra Instinct Son Goku Limitless Awakening. This is an amazing Z card for this deck. You set yourself down to 3 just through natural combat. Like you control when you want to go down to 3, unless obviously your opponent is just way in the lead. And then by your turn 7, like you can swing with your leader, get your energy untapped back, and then Z Awaken into this to get the double strike crit. So that's pretty cool. It also functions as like a blue energy sneaky Champa if you really need it that late into the game. And then, like, if it does survive, like, yeah, you won't get the untap anymore, but you're already at 7 energy, so you don't need the untap anymore, right? So now you just constantly have a huge double strike crit threat and a spare negate that you can get off your leader. So it just came up often. I couldn't imagine playing the deck without this card in it. And this card really just a buff to every blue Son Goku deck that can go above 7 energy. That's the entire deck. It was a super fun deck to play. It just feels powerful. I'm sure there are a couple other decks that just feel like super overwhelmingly good, but this is one of them. Shout out to my friends from Fort Walton Beach who traveled with me to Houston. I love going to Texas. I've got my girlfriend's out there. I've got a bunch of friends out there, so I try to go to every Texas event I can, mainly as an excuse to see them. But yeah, shout out to my guys that drove out with me to Houston. Shout out to all the guys I met at Houston and hung out with. It was super dope. This TCG con was actually super fun. The con itself, it was like really well done. There's some things about the event I probably wasn't too happy about, but the Dragon Ball event, but the actual like con itself was super cool. It was more advanced than any TCG con I had been to, so that was really cool. Shout out to whoever put that on. Shout out to Team Foe as always. They like really push me to be better at this game, and like we push each other, and that's the whole point of like being on a team, guys. Like it doesn't matter what team you're on, but like you're there to help you and your teammates to get better, right? Like who cares if you're the best player on the team or not? Like you're just there to just improve yourself and improve the whole time. So shout out to my guys for helping me do that all the time. And like I catch y'all next time. Like this was super fun event to go to. I really wish more people had come out to this.